Good afternoon, sports enthusiasts. This is another edition of Sox News' very own Sports Shorts.
Exciting stuff in and around the world of sports, Joe.
That is correct, Frank. Frank, can I be frank with you? What's on the list first today?
Well, we'll get to that in a second, but first, here's what's going on later in the show.
Is that right, Frank? So then, what's the rundown for the day?
Funny you should ask, Joe, because my heart has been racing to tell you.
Oh, what's that you say, Frank? We've got the scoop on the 2011 ING New York City Marathon?
That's right, Joe. Let's head to the starting line. What you can see here is the wheelchair division shoving off at 8:30 a.m.
You know, you should never shove a wheelchair off of anything unless it's the starting gate at the New York City ING Marathon.
I could not agree more, Joe. Shoving off 15 minutes later in the next wave is the Foot Locker 5-Borough Challenge, followed by our hand cycle category and select ambulatory athletes with disabilities.
All jokes aside, Frank, these are the people in today's race with the biggest collective balls.
Absolutely correct. I think what my esteemed colleague here means to say is that it takes a lot of guts to endure the 26.2-mile trek in its entirety. So you can see the professional women going off at 9:10, followed a half hour later by their male counterparts.
Is that standard, Frank, giving the ladies a 30-minute head start? Is that true for all co-ed racing?
Actually, Joe, all the entrants are racing against only the clock. As it turns out, apparently no one is racing to actually beat the person ahead of them.
Interesting. Quite interesting, Frank. Almost as interesting as our live coverage of the day's festivities.
Terrific point, Joe. I must say, viewers at home, that we were not prepared to root on the race's competitors exactly.
Defense! 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 As you can see here, the defense chant is a perfectly acceptable tool to help cheer for your favorite in all the sports I know, but as we found at the race itself, not so applicable.
That is 100% correct, Joe.
Go!
We learned a lot at the race today, and we'd like to share some of that knowledge with you viewers at home.
Well, it's pretty thick in the air today with the 2011 marathon going on. Can you smell that, Frank?
It is, Joe. That is the smell of the human endocrine system.
Hard
that
at
can
work.
only mean one thing. Thousands of runners running in the ING New York City Marathon.
How many miles exactly is the marathon, Frank?
Well, the marathon is 26.2 miles, Joe. Smaller than the country of Luxembourg.
I believe that we have a couple runners in the marathon today.
I do. I talked to a runner from Luxembourg earlier. I asked him how he trained. His answer, 3 laps around Luxembourg.
One of the most interesting parts of the day was the wardrobe choices for some of these runners. Let's see how some stood up. Well, it was bound to come up. This will surely get me in trouble with the old lady, but the female runners in the marathon. Have we seen any nipple bleedage?
I've seen nipple sweat, Joe, but no nipple chafing to bleeding yet.
That comes on at about the 22nd mile, I hear.
Yes, right now we're about the 13th to 14th mile. The nipples are getting chafed, but they haven't quite worn through to the capillaries yet.
Now, that's just for your amateur marathon runner. The professional marathon runner usually takes the proper precautions. Nipple bleeding.
Welcome back to Sox News
Sports Shorts. This brings us to the next segment of our show, Sports Cinema, Marathon Edition. Well, all running aside, you know, the marathon, it typically reminds me of the cinematic aspect of running.
It's true, Joe. A lot of movies featured running as their main theme.
Let's look back at a couple. Forrest Gump, for example.
Prefontaine would be another.
Chariots of Fire.
That other movie about Prefontaine that wasn't called Prefontaine.
The Prefontaine, if you will.
Yes.
What about Running Man itself, with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Hadn't thought about that one.
Not your typical marathon.
No, a marathon filled with death and destruction.
My favorite kind of marathon is a hot dog eating contest. Ah, memories. Some finer points that we brought up there.
Yep. And if you haven't seen any of the movies we were talking about, you should rent them because they are a trip.
Viewers at home, thank you for staying with us. This is Sports Shorts. Got very hairy down there on the scene at the ING New York City Marathon.
Speaking of hairy, Joe, we have a swollen sack of questions just waiting to be answered. That's right, it's time for the mailbag.
That we do, Frank. Care to do the honors? I'm just kidding you.
Joe, I'll touch the outside, but I'm not going in it, as I've said before.
Here, let's get a good one, per usual. All right, see what's coming out of the old mailbag today. Here we go, okay. Oh, wouldn't it be old Skip Jitney from Upper Crust, Long Island again. Skip writes, today, Joe and Frank with Sports Shorts. Couldn't help but notice that you had a lineup covering the 2011 ING New York City Marathon. Curious as to why you are, considering that you praise balls in sports that only deal with balls. Seeing as there's no balls in marathon running, why would you be doing this?
Well, Skip,
Let me tell you something, Skippy! There's plenty of balls. It takes balls of steel and miles of balls. 26.2 to be in fact. Never see anybody drop dead at drinking gin and tonics and playing tennis at the country club, have you? No, I don't think so, okay? So the next time you want to question me and my authority on balls...
Hope that answers your question, Skip. It's okay, Joe. We'll be back with more
Sports Shorts.
Welcome back to Sox News.
Sports Shorts. Well, this brings up my favorite segment of the day, Lunch Date. Well, couldn't be more happy. We got our hot dogs on hand from our sponsors, Hot Dogs. Well, let's take this opportunity before we start eating to go back to the scene and give our sponsors a little bit more airtime, shall we? Excellent. Well, let's pause and take a break and let our sponsors step in. This show is brought to you by Hot Dogs.
Hot dogs. You can find them on the street. You can find them anywhere. Hot dogs.
Hot Dogs. That is good.
That is good, Joe.
Good stuff. Well, you hang around. We'll be right back with more Sports Shorts.
Welcome back to Sox News.
Sports Shorts.
Well, Joe, we're running out of time on our clock, much like the stragglers at the end of the marathon.
That is correct. That'd be all for today's coverage of the 2011 ING New York City Marathon. We hope you viewers at home had a good time, because we know we did.
I'm Frank Angelini.
This is Joe Sudol
For
Sports Shorts.